How do you say goodbye to a man who showed the world that it's never too late to rise again? Some people are born with greatness. Others earn it through raw determination. For George Foreman, it was both and then some. He wasn't just a heavyweight champion who soared to the top. He was a mentor, a businessman, a preacher, and the embodiment of second chances. His funeral brought together an entire community of admirers, rivals, and ordinary individuals who found hope in his story. They came to honor a legend who, at different points in his life, terrified opponents with his fists and inspired millions with his faith. The man we remember wasn't simply a sports icon. He was living proof that no matter how low you fall, you can always find a way to stand back up. George Foreman's journey started in the gritty streets of Marshall, Texas, where money was scarce and trouble seemed to knock on every door. Growing up in poverty meant that a life of hardship was almost certain. Neighborhood fights weren't just child's play, they were everyday struggles for respect. While some kids dreamed of safer paths, Foreman learned that survival meant facing challenges head-on. This rough environment would later fuel his relentless spirit in the boxing ring, where he punched his way into the history books. But it wasn't always about fists. Even as a teenager, rumors of a bigger destiny trailed behind him. Locals whispered that young George had a fire in his eyes, a fierce drive to escape a future that felt predetermined. He found himself drawn to sports, not just for the physical release, but for the structure and discipline they offered. Before long, he realized he had a natural gift for combat, a gift powerful enough to change his life. He joined the Job Corps, an experience that shaped his outlook on life and gave him a sense of purpose. Little did anyone know just how far that purpose would take him. Once Foreman committed to boxing, it was as though every punch was aimed at crushing the limits of possibility. He burst onto the scene with a force that made even veteran fighters uneasy. His knockout power was the stuff of nightmares, and people soon realized this wasn't just another contender. He was a phenomenon. The first major triumph came in 1968, when he represented the United States at the Olympics in Mexico City and grabbed the gold. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know this colossal new champion who celebrated by waving a small American flag in the ring. But Olympic glory was only the beginning. When Foreman transitioned into professional boxing, he left behind any semblance of doubt. Blasting through the heavyweight ranks, he knocked out opponents in ways that seemed almost merciless. Fans saw the raw ferocity, but behind the scenes, Foreman was still that hungry kid from Texas, driven by a need to prove himself. Promoters loved him, rivals feared him, and sports writers couldn't get enough of the Destroyer, as some dubbed him. The hype was real, and for a while, it seemed like nobody on the planet could stop Big George Foreman. Yet success on that scale comes with a price. Whispers of arrogance began to grow. Some said the power went to his head, that he was too brash for his own good. Controversial remarks in interviews, tensions with trainers, and a relentless desire to be the best fueled rumors that Foreman was an unstoppable force, but a ticking time bomb of pride. People wondered, would this unstoppable champion eventually unravel? Or would he continue to bulldoze through every opponent, forging an unbreakable legacy?
Ali, here we go, Ali, quick right. George moving. Foreman moving slow. Ali, drop that left foot. Into the far corner. Now moves Ali with a run, both ways. On the left. A wide George Foreman taking a face. And he works over the shoulder of Foreman. This is a combination. Foreman gets up to the knee. 8. That's it. The fight is...
In 1974, the answer came in the form of one of boxing's greatest showdowns, the Rumble in the Jungle against Muhammad Ali. Going in, Foreman was the overwhelming favorite. His record was terrifying, his knockout ratio unmatched. But Ali had a game plan that turned Foreman's strength against him. Employing the rope-a-dope strategy, Ali let Foreman punch himself into exhaustion, absorbing blows and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The result sent shockwaves through the sports world. Foreman collapsed in the 8th round, utterly spent. That single defeat was more than a physical loss. It was a psychological earthquake that shattered his sense of invincibility. Suddenly, the once dreaded powerhouse was human, and the media began to speculate that maybe he wasn't as unstoppable as everyone thought. Some even claimed the fight changed him forever. Foreman struggled internally after the loss. The public saw a disappointed boxer, but only those close to him understood the depth of his despair. He felt that every punch he'd thrown in Zaire had been an act of desperation, as though his soul was at stake. When the final blow landed, it wasn't just his body hitting the mat, it was the collapse of his ego. Friends say he went into a dark spiral, questioning his life's direction and everything he believed in. For many, defeat in the ring was part of the sport, but for George Foreman, it became a catalyst for profound transformation. Rather than soldier on like many defeated champions do, Foreman made a drastic choice. He walked away from boxing altogether. In the late 1970s, the once fearsome puncher took a path nobody expected. He found solace in religion, becoming an ordained minister. Fans were stunned. How could a man whose life had been defined by violence and domination suddenly shift to preaching peace and faith? But Foreman insisted that his spiritual awakening was genuine. He described a near-death experience in the locker room after a match, an incident that led him to question his purpose in life. While some dismissed his claims as dramatic or even fabricated, Foreman stood by his story, urging anyone who doubted him to look beyond the headlines. The truth, he said, was that he felt a calling to serve a higher power rather than chase fame or fortune. His church in Houston quickly became more than just a place for Sunday sermons. It was a community hub where Foreman poured time and resources into helping people in need. He set up charities, youth programs, and counseling services. When asked why he devoted so much energy to causes outside the ring, Foreman replied that saving souls mattered more than saving his legacy. At that moment, it seemed as though the once menacing boxer had found a peace far more valuable than any title belt. Yet whispers of controversy continued to swirl. Some people suggested that Foreman's religious turn was a public relations move to repair his image. Others claimed he was just biding time until he could return to the spotlight. Whatever the speculation, Foreman pressed on, offering sermons about redemption and the power of second chances. He had become a symbol of transformation, a walking reminder that no defeat was permanent unless you chose it to be. As the 1980s rolled on, fans grew comfortable with the idea of George Foreman the preacher, forgetting that he had once been a king of the ring. But then, in the late 1980s, rumors began to surface. Big George was considering comeback. The boxing world laughed at the notion. He was too old, too slow, too far removed from the sport that had evolved so much since his prime. Critics didn't just doubt him, they ridiculed him. But Foreman, stubborn as ever, decided to prove everyone wrong. He announced his return to boxing in 1987. At first, it seemed like a publicity stunt or maybe an odd midlife crisis. Yet fight after fight, Foreman kept winning. His opponents weren't the top contenders, but they were enough to show that the big man still had a punch and a dream. Gradually, the casual chuckles turned into cautious respect. The pinnacle of this comeback arrived in 1994, when Foreman fought Michael Moorer for the heavyweight championship. At a 45, Foreman was considered a long shot, a relic from a bygone era trying to compete with a fresher, faster champion. Yet on that unforgettable night, Foreman landed a thunderous right hand that knocked Moorer out cold. The crowd went silent, almost unable to process what they'd witnessed. In one punch, the old man reclaimed the heavyweight crown, becoming the oldest heavyweight champion in history. It was as if time itself had bowed down before Foreman's unbreakable will. The aftermath of that victory sent shockwaves across the globe. Young fighters looked at Foreman and realized that age might be a limitation, but it wasn't a death sentence for a dream. Fans embraced him as the lovable Grandpa George, a gentle giant who could still unleash havoc when it mattered. He used this new platform to share messages of faith, perseverance, and humility. Lessons that resonated beyond the boxing ring. After all, who better to talk about second chances than a man who had literally punched his way back into the history books? While his fists gave him fame, it was his entrepreneurial spirit that secured his place as a cultural icon.
My George Foreman grills, America's favorite grilling machines, are #1 on everyone's list. It's a real knockout package.
The George Foreman grill became a sensation, selling over 100 million units worldwide. People joked about how the man known for heavyweight hits was now championing a lean, mean, fat-reducing machine. But the grill did more than line his pockets. It thrust him into a different kind of spotlight, one where families across America knew him not just as a boxer, but as a friendly face on a product that revolutionized home cooking. Accusations surfaced that he had nothing to do with designing the grill and that he was only endorsing it for a paycheck. Foreman shrugged off the criticism, saying that whether or not he invented it, the grill provided a healthier way for people to eat, and that made him proud. He licensed his name to several other ventures, staying relevant in a world that often forgets its sports heroes once they retire. But what truly set him apart was how he used his newfound fortune. He invested heavily in philanthropic efforts, building youth centers, sponsoring community outreach, and offering mentorship to up-and-coming fighters. Whenever asked about these charitable acts, he spoke about paying forward the blessings he'd received. To him, financial success wasn't an end in itself. It was a tool to help others find their footing, especially kids who grew up in neighborhoods like the one he'd left behind. One of the most remarkable things about Foreman's later years was his role as a father figure, not just to his biological children, many of whom famously share his name, but to a generation of young athletes who saw him as living proof that change is always possible. At his boxing gym, he offered more than training, he offered guidance. Some of these young fighters came from troubled backgrounds, battling personal demons that made the ring seem like the least of their worries. Foreman taught them about discipline, respect, and the importance of standing for something beyond self-glory. He'd say, "Life is a fight, and you better learn to take a punch without losing your soul." Those words resonated because they came from a man who had lost everything: his sense of invincibility, his pride, and at times his direction, only to rebuild himself stronger each time. His mentorship extended beyond jabs and uppercuts. He helped young people discover their inner strength, urging them to chase dreams they never believed were within reach. Critics occasionally poked holes in his legacy, pointing out that he was a two-time heavyweight champion who had once instilled fear in his opponents. How could he suddenly be this kind-hearted mentor preaching faith and love? But Foreman's answer was simple: people can change if they truly want to. And in his case, the transformation was as real as any knockout he'd delivered in the ring. Then came the day that everyone hoped wouldn't arrive. News broke that George Foreman had taken his final breath. It felt surreal, as though a colossus who had loomed over multiple generations had suddenly vanished. Fans and friends alike were left struggling to imagine a world without that booming laugh and fatherly advice. As funeral plans took shape in Texas, the atmosphere grew somber. Mourners poured in from every corner: boxing champs, business moguls, religious leaders, and countless regular folks with stories of how Foreman had quietly touched their lives. The church overflowed with people. Outside, thousands more stood in silent reflection, holding signs that read, "Never stay down," or "Age is just a number." It was as though the entire state had paused to honor a man who had broken barriers and transcended boxing altogether. Inside the church, Foreman's children delivered heartfelt eulogies about a father who taught them that failure was never final. They recalled how he'd encouraged them to persist in anything they tried, quoting him, "If you can get back up once, you can do it 1,000 times." Former rivals and fellow champions stepped forward to pay tribute. Lennox Lewis spoke of Foreman's improbable comeback, while Mike Tyson, struggling to hold back tears, called him a hero who taught him kindness outside the ring. Even Michael Moorer, the man who lost his title to a 45-year-old Foreman, admitted that it was an honor to be part of that historic moment because it symbolized hope. When the bell tolled 10 times, a traditional salute in boxing, the church went silent with each chime, as if the world itself had halted to say farewell. No roar of the crowd this time, only a heavy hush filled with gratitude, loss, and awe for a man who had meant so much to so many. Even after the service, people lingered, reluctant to let the moment pass. A group of young fighters from Foreman's gym accompanied his casket, each carrying a pair of boxing gloves. For them, this was more than a symbolic gesture. It was a promise to carry on the values he had instilled: resilience, faith, and the unshakable belief that every setback holds a lesson. Walking behind the hearse, some of the teenagers recalled how Foreman had personally intervened in their lives when they were at crossroads. He offered not just a boxing routine, but a chance to see themselves as more than products of their environment. He challenged them to dream bigger, to fight for more than pride or money. In many ways, they were his real championship belts, reminders that his influence was measured not just by titles, but by the lives he shaped for the better. Outside the church, whispers turned to shared stories of random acts of kindness. One businessman recalled how Foreman had once donated a significant sum to revitalize a neighborhood gym that was on the brink of closing. A young mother remembered how a simple conversation with Foreman had helped her son find purpose. Even fans who never met him said they felt like they had lost a personal friend, a testament to his ability to connect with anyone, from battered youth to corporate CEOs. George Foreman's life was a testament to the idea that no battle is truly lost unless you refuse to fight on. He was living proof that your past need not define your future, and that no dream is too big if you're willing to face your fears. Whether you're standing in a boxing ring or fighting a personal struggle behind closed doors, his message rings true. It's not about getting knocked down. It's about summoning the strength to stand back up, time and time again. Now the question is, what do we do with the lessons he left behind? Do we let them fade with the closing of a funeral ceremony? Or do we carry them forward, allowing them to guide us in our darkest hours? George Foreman might have laid down his gloves for the final time, but his spirit remains in every comeback story waiting to happen, in every person who dares to believe that failure is never final. The bell may have sounded, but as Foreman showed us throughout his life, the fight is never truly over until we decide to stop fighting. So here's to the giant who taught us that greatness isn't just about power in your fists, but about the power in your heart to change, to rise, and to transform. May we all find the courage to stand back up, no matter how hard life knocks us down.